Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today is how I made a game in 24 hours using the same exact art as other people. A week ago, I joined the Ms. Game Jam, which is hosted by a fellow YouTuber who also does game development videos called Mrs. A game jam is where a bunch of game developers, either as an individual or as a team, work to make a video game in a set amount of time. I used the Unity game engine, which is a popular and free game engine used by a lot of developers to make my game. I began with a simple boat sprite and some water tiles. I then began working on the code for some basic movement. After I got the movement to work, I wrote a script for the camera to follow the player as the player moves their boat around the scene. I then used some land and tree assets to draw up some islands that could appear. After drawing all the different islands, I wrote some script so the islands would randomly spawn when the player starts the game or resets it after dying. With the other mechanics finished, I began to work on the shooting mechanic because the bow will have a cannon on it. I did this by finding a sprite that looked similar to a cannon and wrote a script for it to point towards the mouse pointer, and when the mouse is clicked, it would shoot this bomb sprite. 9 hours in, and with the base mechanics for the game, I decided to stop there and then resume the next day. The next morning, I started designing and writing some script for a health mechanic for the player. With that done, it was time for me to start implementing the enemies. I started out with a octopus sprite that was in the pack, and I began to add some code and logic to this basic sprite. After I got the basic core mechanics of the enemy done, I put it back and decided to start working on making the game a bit more visually appealing. I did this by adding particles using the Unity inbuilt particle system. I spent some time working with different particle effects and seeing which one fit the most with the art assets I was using, and after I was done, this is the result I got. Like every other good game, I decided to implement the most important thing, which is money. I started out with creating a base game object with a coin sprite that was in the pack. I then wrote some logic that would set a value to the money when it would drop from an enemy, and then assign a sprite to it, so it would be a coin, a pile of coins, or a gemstone, and each of those had their own value. With the looting mechanic implemented, I started work on the enemy spawning. I wrote a script that would spawn the enemies at some game points every set amount of time, and these enemies would obviously choose what type of enemy they would be. With there being money in the game for the player to collect and enemies for the money to spawn from, it was time to add some user interface elements. I then started work on a pause menu that doubled as an upgrades menu for the player. And with that implemented, the player can now pause and upgrade their ship. They can use the money that they've picked up from defeating enemies to increase their speed, turning speed, or overall health points. With the majority of the game being almost finished, I wanted to add one last thing to spice up the gameplay. To do this, I implemented some waves because, believe it or not, in the ocean, there are waves. I wrote some script that would spawn in a column of these wave tiles that were in the pack and push them through the scene to create the effect of waves flowing past the player. With less than 6 hours to finish up in my 24-hour deadline, I started work on a start menu so the player can obviously start playing the game, and if they want to quit, they can just return to it through the pause menu. I drew up some nice art using the sprites and added some basic functionality and some instructions for the player. With the game being ready to be built, I started the build, then uploaded it. But when I started playing, I ran into a small problem. After solving the issue with the black lines, I did some last-minute polish, then submitted my game. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, please like and consider subscribing. Dislike if you didn't enjoy it. And if you want to play my game, the itch.io link is in the description, and please consider leaving a rating. Anyway, that's about it for today, guys. I'll see you in the next one.